Hello. Okay, hi, online students. Do you hear my voice?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Professor.
Okay. Okay, good. So today is the last meeting before the exam. Yeah, so last class. Okay, so maybe at the end of today's session, if there is some time, you can ask questions, okay, about some materials or the last exam, okay? And then, okay, so we continue from yesterday's material. So what did we talk about yesterday? Okay.
Convergence. We're talking about convergence.
Convergence. Yes, yes. Yeah. So we were talking about middle income trap hypothesis. Yeah. So just as an additional note, we were discussing the concept of convergence. Okay, because yeah, so if you plot GDP per capita over time, okay, over a long time, using the absolute number, absolute scale, not relative, okay, then basically everything will be moving up, okay, because income is increasing everywhere, almost all the time, in the absolute scale, okay, but prices are also going up, okay, so prices and income go up in parallel, okay, so it's not so easy to get the clear idea of how the life is improving if you only look at how income is increasing, because prices are also increasing, okay? So what we often do is to compare with the leader, in this case US, okay? Compared with the leader, then what is the progress in terms of percentage of PPP, GDP per capita at the US. Okay, because the ultimate goal, in a way, in development is to close this gap, okay, to bring these numbers as close to 100 as possible, eventually. Okay, so 100 means the same level as the, the standard, okay, in this case, reference country, US. Okay, so that is why we often use, not always, but often use relative measure to assess the progress. Okay. Yeah, so we already discussed the contrast between these two Latin American countries, allegedly caught up in the middle income trap in comparison with South Korea. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we discussed various causes. Okay, and we said there's no fixed mix of causes. It depends on each and every country. Okay, so additionally, Palma conducted empirical research. And yeah, he explains the causes of the long-term stagnation in these countries, Mexico and Brazil, roughly these factors. Okay, one is a low level of investment. Another is technological gap. Technology not yet developed. Gap means compared to the reference place. Okay, and then slow growth in secondary industry. What does it mean, secondary industry? As opposed to primary industry.
Manufacturing industry?
Yeah, basically, it's almost synonymous to manufacturing industry. But the focus here is the industry that uses the output from the primary industry as raw materials. Okay, so that is the connotation carried by this term, secondary industry. So the typical example, typical subsectors are agro-processing and light manufacturing. Okay, so those are secondary industry. So the growth in that industry was observed to be very slow. Okay, and then number 4. It's a topic in political economy, actually. Non-customized dependency on Washington Consensus. Washington Consensus is basically the US-led international financial organizations and their initiatives. Okay, the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and those things. Okay, so those institutions are based in Washington, DC. So that's why we called it Washington Consensus. Okay, so it's basically interventions coming from the US and its allies, targeted on low-income countries, low-income and developing countries. Okay, yeah, we discussed structural adjustment, right? Remember, structural adjustment. Failures in structural adjustments in the 20th century in Africa. We discussed it in this course. Okay, so non-customized dependency, what does it mean? Non-customized. Okay, so basically this initiative coming from Washington Consensus, they don't look at each and every case so much. Okay, they consider, but they don't really tailor the prescriptions, their recommendations to each and every country. So basically what they requested is they provide aid, but in return, those recipients have to produce agricultural products. Okay, primary produce. Yeah, agriculture, fishery, forestry, that kind of thing. Okay. Yeah, so basically it was requested that those countries produce agricultural commodities and export it cheaply to these developed states. Okay, and then, yeah, how? Okay, the method is the use of open markets, free markets. So basically they requested, they tried to impose market mechanisms. Okay, open up the markets. Yeah, otherwise, yeah, it is very common in developing countries. A lot of the sectors are protected, okay, by policies, subsidies. Okay, so US and other countries, they came and said, we will help you, but you have to open the markets and export agricultural products cheaply. Okay, cheaply means, through open markets, they will compete, okay? And then they will lower the cost. So that way, achieve efficiency, low-cost production, and then sell it to us. Then we will support you. So that is kind of, it's a kind of a win-win recommendation. Okay. So the issue was, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it was not very customized. Okay. To each and every country. So that is the argument or the findings in this study by Palmer. Okay, so it's not necessarily consensus, but this is coming from one of the established research studies. Okay, so avoiding the middle income trap. So what do we need to consider? We already discussed causes, okay? But yeah, what can we say? What can we say about, preventing each economy from falling into middle income trap? Okay, so as I mentioned, the challenge is to transition from resource-driven growth to productivity-driven growth. Okay, resource-driven means you input a lot of resources. You use a lot of land. You use a lot of labor. So that is resource-driven growth. Okay, but the productivity-driven growth means you don't necessarily expand land, but in the same size of land, with the same size of land, you get higher yield. Okay, that is productivity-driven growth. Okay, so what does that require? Okay, number one, invest in higher education. Okay, and associated support. Okay, so basically investing in the education system, high quality education system, encouraging creativity, okay, and also to support breakthroughs in science and technologies. Okay, and that is one thing. Another thing is to identify the existing comparative advantages. Yeah, we mentioned the comparative advantages yesterday. Remember? Yeah, subsector or commodity or product or service that each country is relatively good at compared to other goods in the same country. Okay, so comparative advantage, it's not comparing across countries, comparing within. Okay, so which commodity can the country in question produce efficiently, okay, low cost. Okay, so that is what this is talking about. And they identify existing comparative advantage and specialize in it. Specialize in it means invest in it. Okay, so that is one bullet. Okay, next, introduce new products and find new markets to drive export further. Okay, so this is departure from learning and copying from other countries. Okay, so start doing something new based on its own strength. So that is number 3. And also number 4, not only resorting to export, also ramp up domestic demand by leveraging the emerging middle income segment. Okay, we're talking about middle income trap. Okay, so this is about encouraging the expanding middle class segments to use the increasing purchasing power to buy such, innovative, high quality products. Okay. Okay, so assignment 2 was also about the middle income trap. Okay. So that report, so they provide their own views, okay? But it's based on rigorous analysis. So to a good extent, it's credible, but that also has limitations, okay? Because it's conducted by specific researchers. Okay. Yeah, so, yes?
Back to the previous slides, these countries are required to deindustrialize and get back to agriculture. Is that what?
That was this initiative, Washington Consensus. They didn't necessarily agree, but that's what was, you know, recommended by the consensus. Okay, so to what extent they work on it, each country works on it, it's up to them. Okay.
But if we get back to your economic structure,
Mm-hmm.
We learned that economies should move from agriculture to industry to service, step by step, and why?
So that's why I mentioned political economy. Okay. So it's not necessarily free competition based. It's not necessarily merit based. Okay. But it's at least there's a win-win aspect to it because they provide aid. They don't just impose that. They also provide aid. Yeah. Yeah, because they want aid. Okay, many countries want aid. They were also in trouble, Mexico and Brazil. They experienced a lot of crises. Okay, so they wanted help. Okay. Yeah, so when the economy is in trouble, then you know, superpower countries will be influencing. that is a reality. Okay. Okay.
Products and find a new market to drive export further. Because I'm not really understand the reason behind this behavior.
Behavior. That is more like a recommendation. Number 3, right? Yeah. So new product. New product means it's a product with high value addition. Okay. So not just producing ordinary goods, but after producing, then they add value. They add some processing and then sell. That is one thing. And if it's a manufacturing good, then it can be even more innovative, like a new product, you know, based on technologies, ICT. Okay, so it has to be somewhat unique for a country to transition from middle income to high income. Okay, it has to have some kind of export commodity or product or service that is somewhat unique to that specific country. Yeah, so otherwise they will not have the competitive edge in the export market. Because trade is a big part, okay, big portion of the economy. If they don't have export goods or competitive export goods, that means they are importing a lot, okay, and the country will be in deficit. Okay, the GDP will not grow as well. Because what contributes to the GDP or GDP per capita is net export. Okay, net export is export minus import. So if export doesn't grow, then it is very difficult for economy to grow to a very, you know, high income level. Okay. Yeah, so from transitioning from low income to middle income, it's okay to imitate, okay? To do the same thing with other countries, okay? Just cheaply, okay? More efficiently using cheap labor. That is okay. They can transition from low income to middle income. But from middle income to high income, that is difficult because the competitive edge is not there because they are already middle income. Their labor is not cheap, okay? So that kind of position was already, taken over by other low income countries. Right? Okay. Yeah, so assignment 2 will also give consistent but also a bit new perspectives, okay, compared to my class. Okay. Then, power shut off. Okay, let's do it proactively. Okay. Okay, please open the next set of slides. It's here. Okay, close. Okay, so class 25, the last class. Okay. Last class to cover. Yeah. Class 26 materials are also attached. Okay, but it's for you to, it's up to you. If you want to see it, you can see it. It's not a requirement. Okay. So the last topic is economics of public authority. So this is about rent seeking. Behavior to seek rent. What is rent? It's not housing rent. It's not a rental. Okay. Basically, it's about vested interest. Okay, some kind of rights or collusion. Okay, or some interest. Either financial or whatever. That the certain parties already have and don't want to release. Okay. Yeah. So rent seeking refers to the search for private gain or personal gain. Okay, not public gain. From exercise of, from the use of public authority. Some kind of power. Okay, so it's exercised by someone in power. Yeah, so usually in public office, local government, central government, okay, federal government. Okay, this can occur in two forms. One is lobbying, the other is corruption. Okay. So today we mainly talk about the second one, corruption. Okay, but lobbying is also categorized as rent-seeking behavior. Okay, and lobbying is basically legal. Okay, yeah. So what is lobbying? Lobbying is about applying pressure for a policy that will benefit a particular group. Okay, eventually with a net social loss. Net social loss. So when you consider the surplus to the entire society, then it causes a loss. Okay, so before and after lobbying. After lobbying, there is loss to the economy. Okay, loss as a whole. Loss as a whole. Okay, but gain to this particular group. That is the point. Okay, so it's not good for the economy basically, because the total economic surplus will be smaller. Okay, so that hampers economic growth. Okay, so it's about applying pressure to powerful people, decision makers, policy makers. Okay. Okay, so obtaining imposition of a protective tariff that will tax consumers. Okay, so in the case of a group of producers applying lobbying. Okay. Yeah, to get some special treatment. Okay, so that there will be a tariff imposed on, in this case, consumers, but it can be foreign producers as well. Okay, so that the imported goods will be expensive. Okay, so the domestic group of producers, they can have a good position in the market. So that is one example. Okay. Okay, but that will suffer from the surplus to the entire society. Okay? So that is a problem. Okay, however, lobbying is legal. Okay, it's not illegal, so it's okay to, for a group of people, group of producers, okay, for some association, they go to the office, talk about their situation, asking for help, yeah. So that is not illegal, okay. But the rent is generated at the cost of the total economy. Okay, so rent is basically this kind of private gain that benefits. It's a small gain, okay, that benefits particular group of people, but it comes with a big loss in other parts of the economy. Okay. Okay, so lobbying is not the main topic. The other one, corruption. Okay, so corruption is basically abuse of public office for private gains. Okay, so the subject is different. Lobbying, the subject is those outside public office. Okay, but in corruption, the subject is those inside public office. Okay, abuse of public office for private gains by public officers. That is a corruption. Okay, so public agent accepts private compensation for exercising authority over a policy instrument that will create a rent transfer to the bribing agent. Okay. Yeah, you know about the bribery, right? In many places, in many countries, bribery is illegal. Okay. Yeah, so if it's detected, then the officer will be arrested. Okay. Yeah, so it's practiced through use of bribe, but sometimes theft. Okay, and it can be nepotism. Yeah, providing favoritism to particular people that they are close to somehow. Okay. It's often illegal. Okay. So now we talk about different aspects of corruption. One is to have a bit of an idea of impact of corruption. How it impacts the society or the economy. Okay. There was one famous study by Morrow. Okay. So this paper studied 70 countries. Yeah, this is a wide-scale cross-country study. Okay. So what they did is, what they found is, countries with less corruption had more investment and a higher integrity at the level, and a higher income growth. Okay, more investment and a higher income growth. Because more investment means what? Increase in capital. Okay. Not necessarily financial capital. Okay, it can be human capital. It can be public capital. Okay, through investment, higher income outcome will be generated. Yeah. So one example of a quantitative indication, if Bangladesh had levels of bureaucratic integrity at the level of Uruguay, its annual growth would rise by a half percentage point. Okay, so whether a half percentage point is big or small, it's up to your judgment. Okay, but usually many countries exhibit a growth rate like 4%, 5%. Okay, so half percentage point means, about 10% of the growth is affected. It was ruined by some kind of corruption. So that is the indication from this study. How extensive is corruption? How common? How widespread? Okay. Yeah, there are some studies. One study in Uganda, Reinik and Svensson. They found district governments received the money allocated to schools. And then from there, okay, it was supposed to be passed on to schools. But from there, only 13% of these funds reached the schools. Okay, so how much? 87% of the fund. Where did it go? Okay, so officers, they used it for their personal purposes. Okay, it is very common in that part of the world. So when you go to government offices, local government, central government, they always ask for something. When we make a request, then they indicate money, money, money. Okay, yeah. So in this particular case, only 13% of the fund was properly distributed to schools. Okay, and then median school received nothing. What is median? Median is when you rank them, okay? When you rank them according to the money you received. The middle rank. Okay? So for example, when there are 100 schools, okay, receiving different amounts, then we rank them, we arrange them in descending order, okay, from top to bottom. Then we pick the school ranked at the 50, okay? Yeah, with ranking number 50. And then see the amount that school received. It was 0. Okay. And then, yeah, the degree of the theft was larger for poorer communities. So there's variation in the degree of, poverty within Uganda. So in poorer economies, poorer communities, the theft was more prominent. Okay, because officers also don't have money in poorer communities. Okay. Another study by Fisman. He examined the relationship between episodes of bad news about the health of former President Suharto in Indonesia. And he also examined the stock market value of 79 large firms allegedly tied to the Suharto family. Okay. So they looked at implicitly, indirectly looked at the tie relationship between the former president and this group of large companies. Okay. So that is what the study did. They did some statistical analysis. Okay. What's the result? The result was the Suharto connected firms lose more market value when there is news coverage about, bad health of former President Suharto. Okay. And then the closer the connection, the larger the loss in value. Okay. So what is the implication from this? Yeah, so many people somehow, especially investors, so they believed in this kind of alleged ties between the companies and a very powerful person. Okay, so in terms of control, how can we control corruption? Yeah, so Indonesia has a lot of research records. Okay, so how to control? One evidence is from this study, OCAN. So the research was done in Indonesia, conducting an RCT. Remember RCT? Yeah, we discussed it in the context of evidence-based policy making. And also the Nobel Prize in economics. Okay. So they implemented RCT to measure the effects of different types of corruption control. Particularly, they compared top-down approach and bottom-up approach. Okay. And then, estimated the effect on the misuse of fund. Okay, whether the misuse of fund decreased or not decreased. Okay. So top-down means external monitoring by authorities. Okay. That is the meaning of top-down control or top-down monitoring. Bottom-up means it's community level monitoring. Okay. So not monitored by authorities, but within the community. They watch each other. Which one was effective? Intuitively, which one do you think would be more effective? Okay, so the result may be different in other places. Okay, but in this context, the findings showed, okay, first of all, 29% of funds were stolen when not monitored. Okay. 29% of the funds were stolen without monitoring. Okay. So with monitoring, 29% of funds avoided. Okay, avoided the theft. Okay, now by the top-down monitoring, yeah, this amount that was stolen, 29%, it was reduced to 21%. Okay, it was still stolen, but the damage decreased by top-down monitoring. By the bottom-up monitoring, it did not change. It stayed at 29% on average. Okay, so this study suggests that the top-down monitoring is more effective in reducing the incidence of, or the extent of misuse of fund. Okay, but to what extent, okay, the top-down monitoring is better? It's this much. To the extent that it decreases from 29 to 21. Okay? Yeah, so it's a quantitative result. Whether you interpret it as a big reduction or small reduction, it's up to the researcher. Okay?
Based on this data, what kind or how does it look like for the government that can reduce the corruptions for 21%? Would it be the government from democratic more democratic way, or the government from the authoritarian ways? Which one is more effective?
You mean in top-down?
Yeah.
It doesn't distinguish what kind of top-down. It compares against the community level monitoring approach. So there's no answer to that question. Okay. So whether the company or the local officer is a democratic, authoritarian, that is not addressed in this research. Okay, but the focus is to compare between top-down and bottom-up. Because a lot of the researchers also argue that bottom-up is more effective. Okay, so this result is not necessarily common. A lot of people suggest apply community level monitoring. Okay, but in terms of controlling corruption, it was not effective based on this research. Okay, but for many other things, like managing natural resources, managing common properties. Okay, so for many other things, community level approach has been proven effective. Okay. Okay, so again, Reinicka and Svensson. Okay, so they did this study in Uganda. They examined the effects of information on corruption, effectiveness of use of information, dissemination of information. Okay, so newspapers published information on the monthly transfers made to school districts. Okay. But the thing is, not all the communities have access to newspapers. Okay. Some communities had access, but but others didn't. Yeah. So this kind of setup provides a natural experiment setup. What is natural experiment? If we don't say natural, what does it mean? We experimentally provide information. Okay. In that case, we just say experiment, not natural. Okay, so experiment means for the purpose of this research, researchers come to the communities, okay, and they don't receive any newspapers. And then they pick half of them and then provide newspapers, provide information, okay, for the research purpose. Okay, then we say experiment. But natural experiment means it takes advantage of what is already happening. Okay. So this access to newspaper that is already there. Okay. And the researchers utilize this situation as an experiment. Okay, but you know, it doesn't mean we can have natural experiment in any kind of different communities. Okay, so natural experiment means the two communities are not so different. That is the condition. Okay. So you can't always say we did a natural experiment. We compared two groups. Okay. So you can't always say you conducted a natural experiment. Natural experiment means the two groups are not different. You have to ensure it. Okay. The only difference is receiving this newspaper. Okay. So all other factors have to be equal. Okay, anyway, that's not the main focus. Okay. They found this. Transfers increased more where there was better access to newspapers. Okay, so money was properly transferred. Okay, the process was more transparent when they have access to information related to transfer. Okay, so this suggests the role of information dissemination in minimizing or reducing the incidence of corruption. Okay, another related study is Sen. Sen is very famous. Amartya Sen. Yeah. From India, but for the past 50 years, he's been in US and the UK. Okay. He also argued circulation of information exposing corruption can be a powerful instrument to enhance political and bureaucratic accountability. So it's not his essay, it's research results. Okay. Yeah, some other approaches. Yeah, so not these practical things, but more general things, okay? Other approaches to limit corruption. Scale down the government. This is particularly important when the state is predatory and there are valuable public domain resources and unclearly defined property. Okay, so yeah, it's related to what Finn said earlier. Okay, authoritarian government, so predatory government. And then, yeah, public domain resources, things like oil, natural resources, or fishery, okay, fishery resources. Okay. So this approach, scale down the government, it can be effective when the regime has this kind of structures. Privatization of some public services. Okay. Yeah, it's often the case with utilities, public utilities companies, energy, water, and then limit public ownership of commercial enterprises. Okay. So basically to transfer services or production from the public domain, public sector to private sector. So that's how we try to achieve scaling down the government. Okay, shifting to greater reliance on market mechanisms. Okay, so introducing market mechanisms, promoting free markets. Okay, so removing regulations in domestic and international trade. Okay, and then reduce state interventions. Decentralization. That is also another approach to scale down the central government. Okay. So a good thing is citizens will be better informed locally, and they can utilize the local level social capital, local level connections between people. Okay, to enforce rules and institutions. Yeah, informal rules, okay, institutions. But the downside is decentralization may attract lobbying. Okay, because the government is less powerful. The small government, so compared to the lobbying body, the relative power balance is lower. Okay, so there's a trade-off. Decentralization, not always good. Okay. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. For the privatization, does it mean that the roles of government will be reduced in terms of monitoring?
No. It's not about changing monitoring, but it's about shifting the economic activities from the public sector to private sector. So for example, converting some schools, public schools to private. Converting some, water services owned by the government to the private sector. So the government releases ownership of businesses.
Yeah, and by that situation, it doesn't mean that the government will have lower degrees of monitoring, right?
It's not about monitoring. The power will be reduced.
Just about the power.
Yeah.
So when after we privatize, just like for example school, will the price increase? The price of school fee, is that gonna increase because
It depends. If the public schools receive a lot of subsidy, then privatization means higher fee. But if there's tight competition, if there's harsh competition among many producers, okay, many schools, then that can also lower the price. Yeah, but basically, if you convert a public university to private, and then in the short run, the fee increases. In the short run. Because public domain universities, they tend to receive a lot of subsidy. Okay, so that's why a lot of the universities in Thailand, their tuition is a lot cheaper compared to IIT. Because IIT doesn't receive tuition subsidy from the government. Okay, we meet in 10 minutes. corruption is not an indicator of middle income trap. Corruption is more associated with poverty. So low-income communities or low-income places, low-income countries, they tend to have more corruption. Okay. So that is one important point. So it's a good question. Yeah. So the important points here are, maybe there are 2 or 3 important things. One is corruption cannot be eliminated. It can only be reduced. Okay. There have been many attempts to eliminate corruption, but many of the attempts only proved to have no effect. Okay. And some attempts resulted in reduction in corruption. Okay. But it was never eliminated. Okay. So that is one important thing. So very difficult to control. And the other important thing is what I just mentioned. It's strongly linked to poverty. Okay. Yeah, so scaling down the economy, scaling down the government, that was one thing. Another thing is citizen empowerment. So there are long route and short route. Long route is basically about going through election. But it can take long because election doesn't happen every year. Okay. In some very particular rare cases, it can happen. Between 2005 and 2012, in Japan, there was a national election like almost every year. Okay, but the national leader switched it like every year, like 6, 7 consecutive years. Okay, but basically, it's a long route. Okay, in many countries, in many developed places, they don't do the national election every year. In the US, how many years? 4 years, right? That is relatively short. In many places, the leader stays in power for much longer. Okay, yeah, but it's still, one of the routes, okay, through which, citizens' voice can be reflected. Okay. Yeah, but so one issue is it's a long route. Okay, it doesn't happen every year. Another issue is there may be too many issues to be considered. Okay, when voting, not only corruption. Okay, so single issue voting is very difficult. That's the limitation of any election, because they don't vote for policy. They vote for people or politician or party, right? So that is the limitation of electoral process in general. Okay, so short route is more direct, sending the voices, collecting citizen report cards, okay, and then giving it to service providers, or representation in local social councils. Okay, so participation in decision making. So that can be short route, but it can be less effective compared to the formal route. Okay. Okay, so this is the last thing to show. Okay. Yeah, I just showed this, introduced this index. indicator of corruption. Corruption Perceptions Index, or CPI. Yeah, when you just say CPI, it usually means something else. Consumer Price Index. Okay, so that's what people mean when they say CPI. Okay, but some people understand this CPI as well. So it's published by Transparency International. Okay, it's a bit of a funny name for me. Okay, yeah, but it's not, you know, it's not an ad hoc decision. It's based on some research. It takes into account many different organizations conducting surveys. Okay, so these are the organizations. Okay, starting from African Development Bank to, you know, World Bank, World Economic Forum. Okay, so there are like 15, 16 different surveys conducted by these organizations. And the minimum requirement is, okay, a country needs to be evaluated by at least three sources. Otherwise, the country doesn't go on the list. It doesn't go into the ranking. Okay, so that is the minimum requirement. Okay, so the latest figure, the latest result came this year, January. Rankings 179 countries and regions. Not only countries, it also ranks regions, okay, like cities within some countries. Okay, and the important thing is 0 indicates high corruption. 100 indicates very clean, transparent. So it's more like a transparency index, okay, rather than corruption index, because a higher number means higher transparency. Yeah, but the name is Corruption Perceptions Index. Okay. So this was the result. The top ones and the worst ones. Asian countries are in bold. Okay. Yeah. So most of the top performers, the ones that are considered transparent, they are from. They are from. Many of them are from Scandinavia, Northern Europe. Okay. Plus New Zealand. So the only one from Asia is Singapore. So 85. The only 2 points difference from the top. Okay. Yeah, and coming toward the bottom. Yeah, so these places have index values like, 15, 16. Okay. Then it's ranked at the very bottom. Okay, so yeah, some places in Asia and Africa and Venezuela. Okay, so now I only picked Asian countries and regions. Okay, so it's a full list, but only for Asia. Okay, so these are the countries. Okay, so Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, UAE, Bhutan, Taiwan, Qatar, Israel, Brunei. The global average is 43. Okay, so those who are above 43, so down to Jordan, and they are above the global average. Yeah, so from here it's below global average. Okay. Yeah, so Hong Kong, Taiwan, of course, they're China, but they usually receive different, evaluation because of the history. Hong Kong used to be controlled by UK, so they have different systems. So that's why different evaluation will go. Yeah, so these are the low side of Asia. Okay, so we will not do this one, class 26. Okay, this is just for your materials. Okay, so we will not do it in the exam either. Okay, so any questions about class 25 or any class? Or maybe the previous exam question. If you have any question, you can ask.
Professor,
Yes?
what is like, where does mass revolution fall? Is it a short route or is it a different thing?
Sorry?
Like in citizen empowerment?
Uh-huh.
In citizen empowerment, where does like mass revolutions fall? Is it like a short route or a completely different thing?
Mass revolution?
Yes.
I don't exactly know the meaning.
Like protest, like
Okay.
mass protest,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a short route or?
That is not the empowerment. It's more related to lobbying that I mentioned at the very beginning. Okay. So
Okay.
So exerting pressure by a group of people or stakeholders, not through corruption. And it's legal. Okay, so lobbying is legal. So resulting to protest, demonstration. Yeah.
It is done like against corruption, right? So
in many cases, yes. Yeah. They most of the time they have complaints about some kind of corruption or unfair treatment. Yeah. Yeah, but it can be about the general policy failures, okay, like economic recession. That is also possible. So there are all kinds of, root causes. Okay. Yeah, any other questions?
Professor.
Hi, who is this?
Sir, this is Kusala. Sir, actually, I am confused. You mentioned that decentralization is not good all time. Why did you mention that? I did not understand why decentralization is not good all time, or what is the bad impact of decentralization? I could not understand it.
Decentralization?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, decentralization is basically making each unit of government small. So scaling down, reducing the scale of one unit of the government. Okay, so instead of all the power is concentrated in the federal government, okay, they spread authorities to the local level. That is decentralization.
Sir, I understand decentralization, but you have mentioned that decentralization is not good sometimes. Why did you mention that?
Decentralization what?
Sir, you mentioned that decentralization is not good sometimes. Sometimes it could have bad impact on people. Why did you mention that?
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't understand that point.
One example I gave is it attracts lobbying, okay, because the government is less powerful, okay, so people are less afraid to come and raise voice, complain, okay, so that kind of thing can happen. Yeah, so the control will be weaker, okay, so it can work both ways, okay. In terms of corruption, it can be good, but
Yeah.
in terms of proper control, it may not be good, okay, because the company will be relatively weak.
But sometimes it can also ensure democracy.
Yeah, yeah. Not sometimes, often. It's basically a good thing, okay? But there are limitations as well. And it also depends on the scale of the nation, okay? So it doesn't apply to all the countries homogeneously. But usually big countries like the US, China, India, decentralization is more efficient because the central government cannot take care of everything happening in all the places, okay?
Thank you so much, sir.
Professor,
Yes?
can I asking about the previous class?
Sorry?
Can I asking you about the previous class about the wrong strategy in agricultural development? Can you explain all overall again? Oh,
Which class? Do you know the number?
22.
22.
Yeah. Begin with page 6, page 10.
Is it class 21? You mean class 22?
Yeah, yeah. About the wrong strategy in agricultural. So I have a little bit confused about the brand reform. So maybe just
22?
yeah.
Yeah, I opened the file, so can you say more specifically? 22. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So this strategy is like to reform from the larger holder to peasant, right, or small holder. So I have a little bit confused about the effect from that. The next page, next 2 page. Can you explain it again?
Oh, this one? So you know the purpose of land reform or agrarian reform? It goes back to the structure of poverty, components of poverty. One component was asset income. Okay, so by increasing the asset holding, the poverty will be reduced. Okay, so that is the bottom line. So this kind of land reform tells large-scale landlords, okay, holding a big agricultural land, they have to transfer the ownership to small-scale farmers who are working on their land. Okay. So basically, disaggregating land rights. That is the purpose. Okay. But when that kind of policy takes effect, then landlords also take some actions. Okay. Because landlords are also rational actors of the economy. Okay. They want to protect what they have. They want to maximize their own profit. Okay. So based on rational decisions, they do things like this. Disaggregate land rights to multiple relatives. Okay, so instead of one person holding big land, divide the land, okay? And then instead of giving the rights to a group of peasants, giving it to the close people, family members, relatives, close friends, okay? Then it will look like a collection of small farms, okay? So they don't have to do anything. They don't have to do any transfer of land rights, okay? As long as the land is owned by many people in small pieces, okay? So it's a way of avoiding that land reform policy. So that is one thing. Number two is they also laid off a lot of peasants. Laid off, fired a lot of peasants who were working on the farmland, okay? To pretend to be smallholders, that is one thing. And also to get rid of peasants, because when peasants continue working on the land for a certain year, that's when they become eligible to receive land rights, okay? So if they work for a certain period, then they become eligible. So large landholders, some of them, okay, they want to avoid, okay? So they just fire, they release peasants. So there's no more peasants who are eligible to receive lands. So that is number two. Number three, okay, so rotation system, related to number two, but instead of firing, they started rotating peasants, okay, moving peasants from one piece of land to another, okay, from season to season, okay.
Okay. For number two, the get rid is illegal or not?
No, nothing is illegal. So that's why they can do it. It's like a loophole.
Okay.
So that is the failure. That is the drawback of land reform, traditional land reform. Okay, not the improved ones. Okay. So what will happen? The poverty will increase because peasants will lose land. Okay, and also for large holders, they have to continue farming by not through peasants, but hiring people. Okay, hired labor is not productive because they don't invest. They don't have the incentive. They don't have the motivation to invest in land because they're just hired. They're paid by the hour. Okay, so both for small holders and for large holders, it was not efficient. So they both became poorer. Okay, is it okay?
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Okay. Tin, okay? Nick?
For myself, I think I can follow at that time on this line. I'd like to know why inequality reduction tend to worsen the poverty. Do you have any experience from country or example?
Usually, inequality doesn't happen alone. Okay? Over time, things tend to improve. Okay? So it usually comes with average growth, average income growth. Okay? So that is why the poverty rate decreases. Okay? So the poverty improves, poverty rate decreases. Okay? But the effect is mostly coming from the average income growth.
One is have strongly correlation, right? This one not so.
So especially in low-income places, reducing inequality means bringing down the income from relatively rich people. And then some of them can fall into poverty. In low-income places, Okay. Even relatively rich people, they are not really rich.
Okay.
So reducing inequality means those relatively rich people, their income will be smaller. By definition of inequality reduction. Inequality reduction doesn't mean only lower side people will increase. Okay. By definition, higher income people, they will lose. Okay, a bit. That is the definition of inequality reduction. So in very low income places, that can result in some people newly falling into poverty. Okay, so poverty can be aggravated. Okay. Anything else?
If that inequality is generated from corruption, for example, favoritism, should we reduce that inequality so the country will spend the resource efficiently? Should we? I mean, I'm asking you your for answer.
Okay, so if inequality was generated by corruption,
Yes.
What is the last part?
For example, favoritism. We favorite a company, and that particular company growth very much, and inequality rise. So should we reduce inequality in this way?
It would be ideal in terms of poverty reduction. If a small group of people have too much wealth, if that is distributed to low-income people, that can contribute to poverty reduction. But how it happens is about.
So many government fail to tax those.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Rich.
Because there's a collusion. So wealthier people or mega investors, they are usually colluded with the political leaders.
Okay.
So that is why transfer is not so easy. Redistribution, okay, increasing taxes on mega investors. It's not very easy. So that is why growth is more effective. Okay, rather than internal transfer of money from rich people to poor people. Okay. Okay. Anything else? I was going to draw a graph, but maybe there's no time, so I will not do it. Public policy, not next semester. Next semester, very likely, we will have a social impact assessment in January. Okay. Yeah. Just yesterday, I asked Professor Kyoko to offer. She hasn't confirmed, but her response was good. Inter-semester, we will have public policy. Very likely. Dr. Lai, she agreed this morning. Yeah. So the requirement is for master students, you have to take at least 4 credits out of the 6. Okay, coming from those 3 courses. Okay, so yeah, usually PhD students, they finish coursework in 1 semester. So if there are some interesting courses next semester, you can still sit. Okay. So you just get approval from instructor. You send an email. And then usually instructors allow. Okay, so you come and then sit and then listen. Yeah, so that is also a good way of expanding horizon. Okay. Any other things? Yeah, so corruption is, yeah, coming back to corruption. Corruption is not only with the public authority. It can happen with powerful, huge investors as well. Okay, because big investors and the political leaders are usually colluded. Okay, so yeah, it's very common. So that's why a lot of political leaders, they implement policies that favor, particular group of people or particular industry. If the president supports a lot of fund, receives, sorry, not supports. If the president receives a lot of funds from, for example, the oil industry, okay, then the president would try to support the oil industry. Okay? So that kind of collusion is very common, even in high-income countries. Okay, so you want to go home? Or you're already home? Okay. So we meet on Wednesday. Okay. See you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Hey, Professor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.